Imagine accidentally stepping on a landmine, and the only guy who can save you has other plans. This one is crazy. Don't blink. In the opening scene, our three musketeers, Alicia, Daniel, and Chris, are hiking up a mountain in Georgia. The country, not the state, so no peaches here. Sorry, Justin. At the summit, Daniel gets down on one knee, looks Chris in the eye, and asks him to marry him and Alicia. Yep, this just got interesting. Chris starts reciting his lines like he's been rehearsing for months, but suddenly he bails faster than a cat from a cucumber, leaving with his bag. That night, they're chilling around a campfire, and Daniel's like, "Dude, what's up?" But Chris is all, "Nah, nothing, man." Alicia invites Daniel into their tent for the natural obligation, while Chris douses the fire and retires to his tent like a grumpy bear. Next morning, Chris wakes up to find some stranger rummaging through their stuff. Like a territorial dog, Chris confronts him, but the dude's trying to explain. Daniel and Alicia show up, and Alicia's like, "Chill, Chris. It's just Devi, my personal camera retriever." Devi then snaps a photo of the trio with some director-level instructions. And suddenly he's all, "Don't move, Chris." Why? Because Chris, the lucky guy, is standing on a landmine. Daniel tries to calm Chris down while Devi claims he'll go for help, but it'll take him 4 hours minimum. Daniel tells Alicia to hide behind a rock, not the Dwayne Johnson kind, and he stays with Chris, promising to be his best man at their triple wedding. Alicia's phone rings and they realize they have service. They climb higher to get a better signal and Daniel calls for help. He hangs up, then tells Alicia that rescuers won't help tricksters. Confused, Alicia listens as Daniel spills the beans. He knows she and Chris got a little too friendly. Chris fesses up, and Alicia is a sobbing mess. But here's the twist. Daniel says his phone never had service, and he made it all up. He whips out a shovel and tells Alicia to dig a hole for Chris to jump into. Chris realizes Daniel's behind this wild ride. As he keeps apologizing, Daniel yanks out the mine pin and yeets it into the woods. Daniel goes back to Devi, who's apparently in on this crazy plan. Alicia retrieves the pin, unsure if it'll work. Desperate, she starts digging. Suddenly, they spot Ilya, the mysterious dude watching from behind a boulder. Will he help our troubled trio? Stay tuned. Ilya chases after his dog, which is sprinting like it's late for a job interview. Alicia tries to keep the dog away from Chris, but Ilya suddenly appears with a gun, making them feel like they're in an action movie gone wrong. As Ilya investigates Chris, he discovers that Alicia and Chris are telling the truth when they raise their hands, and quickly spill the beans about the situation. Ilya sets down his luggage and asks how he can help. Alicia, brainstorming like she's in a DIY disaster movie, suggests digging a hole for Chris to jump into. Ilya, now curious, grabs Alicia's arm and asks how they got into this wild mess. Alicia informs him that her boyfriend set them up because she had a fling with Chris. Ilya chuckles and calls her a cheater. Chris fiercely warns him to watch his words, making Ilya reconsider his involvement. But ultimately, Ilya decides to stick around and lend a hand. As Chris tells Ilya that he can have anything he wants as a reward, Ilya rummages through their bags and steals Alicia's underwear. He gives it a good old sniff and cheekily asks if he can have anything he wants as long as he helps. When Alicia says yes, Ilya pushes his luck and asks for the underwear she's wearing right now. Imagine the smell. Chris steps in and offers his money and credit card instead, but Ilya insists on Alicia's underwear. Reluctantly, she agrees and heads to her tent to change, but Ilya stops her, wanting a front row seat to the show. Chris intervenes, saying that backup is on the way. Ilya, skeptical, threatens to push Chris. Alicia steps in and finally gives in to Ilya's bizarre demand. Alicia hands her clothes to Ilya, who in a strange turn of events has her play fetch with his dog. It's not the weirdest game of fetch, but it's up there. Suddenly, Ilya's radio crackles to life. He answers it and Alicia and Chris seize the opportunity to ask if they can borrow his radio to call for help. Ilya, driving a hard bargain, asks what's in it for him. Alicia's frustration mounts, but Ilya persists with his question. She politely asks to call for help, and Ilya, with a grin, embraces her. He's got one more request before he lends them the radio. Tossing her clothes back at her, Ilya tells her to fetch it like a dog. Alicia, rolling her eyes, initially refuses, but after realizing the gravity of their situation, she plays along. Alicia retrieves the underwear, but Ilya isn't satisfied with her performance. He tosses it again, instructing her to crawl this time. Alicia, determined to get that radio, goes the extra mile and crawls to grab the underwear. But Ilya, ever the critic, tells her to do it again, this time without using her hands. So Ilya and Alicia are playing this bizarre game of fetch with some undies. Alicia's got mad skills and snags them with her teeth. She trades the unmentionables for radio because, you know, priorities. She tries calling for help, but the guy on the other end is like, "No habla inglés, señorita." Alicia asks Ilya to translate, and he's like, "Sure, but you gotta play a little strip poker with me." Alicia's not down with that, so she goes back to digging or whatever. Then the guy on the radio's back, and Ilya's like, "Yo, that's my boy Sergey. Don't make him mad or he'll go full hook on us." Alicia tries telling Sergey everything's chill, but he's like, "Ke?" Ilya's like, "Okay, seriously, poker or bust?" Alicia caves and off comes the jacket. They chat with Sergey a bit and Alicia's losing more clothes. She finally puts her foot down, and Ilya's like, fine, be that way. But then Sergey's back on the line, and Ilya's all, hey, we had a deal. Alicia's like, nope, not happening. Ilya gets ticked off and pulls a gun on her. Meanwhile, Chris has been chilling in the background, and he's like, yo, Ilya, your mom's so dumb, she brought a spoon to the Super Bowl. This catches Ilya's attention. What a clever joke. Ilya turns the gun on Chris, and Alicia books it. Ilya sends his dog after her, like some twisted game of tag. With Alicia Screams as the soundtrack, Chris goes full MacGyver, making a hook to snatch Ilya's gun. He gets the gun, but then Ilya shows up with Alicia as his human shield. Ilya's all, go ahead, make my day. Chris can't pull the trigger, and Ilya makes him call Alicia a cheater. He even gives her a little scratch on the cheek for dramatic effect. Ilya keeps gasping about punishing cheaters and drags Alicia behind a boulder. Things take a dark turn, and let's just say, Ilya's not winning any Boy Scout badges for his behavior. All the while, Chris is just standing there, feeling useless and wishing he'd brought his own gun to this underwear-fetching, radio-talking, strip-poker-playing party. Alicia, fed up with Ilya's shenanigans, decides to go all ninja on him and grab his knife. Chris, shouting like a bootleg action hero, tells her to get a move on. Out of nowhere, Ilya's dog charges, ready to protect its owner. Chris fires a shot, hoping to stop the canine crusader, but ends up hitting Alicia instead. What are the odds? Chris faints, overwhelmed by the drama. Coming to, Chris hears Ilya's voice, revealing that the whole mine thing was just a cruel prank orchestrated by Daniel. Classic Daniel, am I right? Ilya saunters away, leaving Chris with poor Alicia, now sporting a very unfashionable, fatal neck cut. Chris calls for help, but it seems his phone is set to no reception mode. Later, Chris stumbles upon a local's house where a woman and her daughter take pity on this disheveled stranger. Chris is beyond thrilled when the daughter offers to print out a map for him, because who needs a GPS, right? Soon he's introduced to the ladies of the house, Laika and Tanya, who just so happen to be Ilya's family. Talk about a small world. Meanwhile, Ilya's off tending his bees, probably contemplating a career change to beekeeping. Laika and Tanya invite Chris to lunch, and he graciously accepts. Ilya returns, securing his dog with a chain that's more fit for a bike lock, and walks in to find Chris sitting with his family. Awkward. Introductions are made, and Chris smoothly covers up their prior encounter by saying he saw Ilya's name on some random drawing. Ilya, sensing that something's up, tells Chris to hit the road, but our hungry protagonist insists on finishing dinner first. Tanya tries to keep the peace, and Ilya begrudgingly allows Chris to eat, on the condition that he leaves immediately after. Chris chows down, but when he tries to go for seconds, Ilya cuts him off. No more freebies, pal. Tanya hints that it's time for Chris to skedaddle, and he packs up his bag, thanking them for the meal. Ilya tells Chris to meet him in 15 minutes, but not to drag his family into the drama. Chris, with a mischievous grin, takes off. Ilya watches as Chris drives away from the house and hops into his car, probably blasting some catchy tune about twisted fate or something. As Chris saunters away, Ilya makes a mad dash to his dog, untying him with the hope of sending a canine scare package Chris's way. The family assembles at the dining table where Ilya wrestles with his meal like it's a plate full of snakes. After admitting defeat to his food, he retreats to the living room for solace. Ilya paces around, contemplating dialing 911, but eventually deciding that his dog would do a better job at handling Chris. As if on cue, the dog starts barking, making Ilya feel like a psychic dog whisperer. But when the barking cuts off suddenly, Ilya gets a sinking feeling in his stomach. He heads to the porch, calling for his dog like a lost love. When Fido doesn't show, he starts down the stairs, scanning the yard like a detective. In the meantime, Chris reappears, knocking on the door with a dramatic flair, claiming emergency. Laika, the ever-cautious one, peeks through the window before opening the door. Chris bursts in, cradling a bloody puppy. He tells the family that the poor pup got a taste of the highway life and lost. Ilya, following a breadcrumb trail of blood back to his house, freaks out and starts screaming for everyone to get inside. Reaching the living room, Ilya spots Chris and his dog. Rage takes over and he goes for his weapon, only to find that the bullets have vanished. Like a bad magic trick. Ilya points his now empty gun at Chris, who just stands there with a grin and dares him to shoot. Chris reveals his hidden knowledge of Ilya's bulletless rifle and pulls out his own revolver. A two-legged surprise in store for Ilya. Tanya hears the commotion and sees her spouse on the ground. She makes a desperate plea to Chris, promising they'll do anything if he puts the gun away. He does, for now. Chris takes charge, directing Tanya to a corner and ordering Laika to bite her mother's hands and feet. Money's offered, but Chris refuses, saying, "I prefer Bitcoin." With a bang, Chris shoots their mirror, sending a clear message to a hesitating Laika. As she tearfully ties up her mother, Chris taunts Ilya with some random underwear. He insists they play a twisted game of Russian roulette, where Laika's dignity is on the line. Chris ups the ante by pouring alcohol on Ilya's wounds, turning him into a human cocktail of pain. He forces Laika to retrieve the underwear like a dog, only to remind her that dogs don't have hands. With no other choice, Laika plays along, fetching the undergarment with her mouth. The horrifying game takes a tragic turn as Chris accidentally shoots Laika. He collapses in shock, realizing he's gone too far. leaving everyone in a state of despair and disbelief. The once light-hearted, family-friendly scene now shattered by the darkness of an unexpected tragedy. Moral of the story? I have no idea.